Did I need to upgrade to the iPhone 13 Pro Max? 110% no. Did I do it anyway? You bet I did. Hey ladies and gentlemen, Adrian here for Digital Dojos, and today we're talking about whether or not you should be upgrading or will upgrade to the iPhone 13, Apple's latest flagship phone. As always, when it comes to these upgrade videos, I always like to say it's subjective. There's always three factors I try to base these videos on and base these decisions on when I'm talking to family, friends, and it's these three factors. First off, your budget. The constraints of your budget are always going to matter, and it's always something important because not everybody can go and drop thousands of dollars plus on a new phone. Number two is going to be the upgrade path that you have available. Some people buy their phones outright and own it. Some people do monthly installments. Some people get things like AT&T Next, which I'm on, or Apple's upgrade path, where it effectively makes it easier for people to upgrade year after year at little to no cost, or trade-in programs. There's a lot of avenues now to upgrade. And then last but not least, and I think arguably the most important at number three outside of budget, is the current phone that you're on. If I'm talking to somebody like myself who's coming off of a 12 Pro Max, that's pretty much current gen hardware just now being replaced by the new 13 gen product. It's easier of a question to answer than it is somebody who's coming off an iPhone 11, an iPhone 10, or an iPhone 8 even, so on and so forth. So those three factors, budget, upgrade path, the phone you're currently on, is always something that you should consider. Now with that, let's talk about the new iPhones as a whole. So Apple had their event earlier this week in which they announced their new flagship devices being the iPhone 13 and 13 Pro line. They also did some updates to their iPad, iPad mini, and Apple Watch Series 7, but we're going to be focusing primarily on that of the all-new, Apple iPhone 13 because it's the biggest talk of the town. It's always going to get the biggest buzz when it comes to flagship devices just because Apple is one of the industry leaders in this space. And rightfully so. But at the same token, nowadays we also have a ton of great competition out there in the market and a lot of innovative tech making its way, like the Galaxy Fold, so on and so forth. So we should start by answering what's actually new in the iPhone 13 lineup of phones. And speaking of lineup, you have 4 new phones that you can effectively get. You have the same lineup as the Apple iPhone 12 lineup in that of the 13 mini, the 13, the 13 Pro, and the Pro Max. If you're unfamiliar with how that lineup works, it kind of boils down to you have the smallest, most compact in the mini at 5.4-inch screen size, 6.1, and then you have the Pro models at 6.1 and 6.7-inch displays. So the big delineation there being the screen sizes first and foremost, and then you have the 2 Pro models and the 2 non-Pro models. The Pro models always tend to have the better specs, the slightly improved camera, above the standard models, and then they tend to get the newest features out of the bunch when it comes to the overall lineup since they're the quote-unquote Pro models. So you have these 4 new phones. Across the board on the 13 lineup, you have all brighter displays, so you have that Super Retina display, but it's 40% brighter now coming off of the 12 lineup. You have the new A15 Bionic processor, meaning it's going to be faster, as it always is. Year after year, you don't typically get a flagship phone that's slower. But the one caveat there is not only is it faster, but it's more efficient. So with all these upgrades that you get under the hood, thankfully, we're also seeing substantially improved battery life, an extra hour or 2, maybe even 3, depending on the model that you get in terms of use case. We'll actually see how that effectively works in real-world scenarios and real-world usage. My phone's going to be coming in next week. I opted for the 13 Pro Max, so we'll be able to kind of give more initial thoughts and reports there. But again, you're getting faster phones across the board. They all have the new 5G support, just like the 12s did. The real big differences in the 13, to be honest, where you're going to see the major differences is in the Pro line, so the Pro and Pro Max. The 2 Pro models now have 120 hertz ProRes display. What that means, and I think it's arguably the biggest feature this year, is hertz is the refresh rate of your screen. So you're effectively doubling, going from 60 hertz, which most people are used to 120 hertz. This is a term that gamers are usually familiar with screens and monitors, because it's a more responsive, more fluid overall experience when it comes to interacting with your screen. ProRes specifically for Apple is going to allow for the refresh rate to scale in proportion to what you're doing on your actual device. So this means an overall smoother, seamless experience. It's been something that we've seen across Android phones at 120 hertz refresh rate, but it's nice to finally see Apple integrate this into that of their Pro lineup. And I think it makes sense because this is Gen 1 of their ProRes tech. It makes sense to bundle that in the Pro phones rather than the base phones, though I wouldn't be surprised in a year or two from now where we see the ProRes become kind of the standard across the lineup of iPhones. But that is arguably the biggest feature and the biggest upgrade in that of the 13 series. Of course, all the cameras have been upgraded as well. Better sensors, bigger sensors, new camera arrays across the board, improved, like I said, lenses, and optic image stabilization across the board. So you're going to get better pictures. You're going to get better quality video across the board. The new support for 4K ProRes formats on the Pros, and this new feature that Apple is touting as cinematic mode. So essentially it's rack focusing. So you have the ability to kind of record and get this nice focus on your foreground subject and then create this depth of field and get that background focus as well and have it easily transition between the two. Apple spent a lot of time highlighting this, and don't get me wrong, super cool feature. I'm sure there's a lot of technical work that went behind the scenes, both software and hardware, to make this more possible. And as always, it's always great to see the advancement of technology on mobile phones when it comes to videography. They try to do this whole series around pro filmmakers using the 13 to shoot movie-esque video. And look, this is a cool feature, and it's available from the Mini Pro or iPhone 13 Mini, 13 Pro, and Pro Max. I don't think this is a feature that a lot of people are going to upgrade for. It's cool, but I don't think the average consumer is going to care too much about being able to shoot movie quality stuff on their iPhone 13. Hell, I don't even think the major pros out there, people aren't going to go and buy this because of this feature specifically. If you're into videography at that level, you're not going to spend $1,000 on a new phone to shoot video with when you can put that towards an actual DSLR or mirrorless camera, in my opinion. It's a nice to have in addition with your phone, but it's not going to be something that you purely upgrade for. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's talk about actually upgrading and the actual upgrade path and who this is going to be more ideal for. If you're on the 12 currently, I'm going to go ahead and say it is not worth you upgrading to the 13 flat out. I would wait till the 14th edition of iPhone, or whatever they call it, because the 13 is what the 12 should have been. It's all the features that we should have seen in the 12. Maybe it's due to pandemic constraints in manufacturing, but it gets a lot of cool stuff under the hood. That being said, coming off the 12, I think you're better off waiting. Your 12 will still last you another year or so, plus in that you can really let these features refine themselves in this first generation tech of ProRes and cinematic mode and things like that. You're going to get the best overall experience in the 14, I think, whenever that comes out. Cosmetically, they're not that much different in terms of design changes, the 12 versus the 13. I mean, the notch is slightly smaller now on the 13, with a slightly smaller notch, but again, that's not a huge reason to upgrade. The camera array is kind of different now on the 12 versus the 13. You have a diagonal camera array. Again, not something that's going to be a game changer. It's going to be better quality, but it's not going to be a game changer. So I'm just going to go ahead and flat out say if you're on the 12 series of iPhones, you do not need to upgrade to the 13. You're better off waiting, saving your money, and then putting that towards whatever the next iteration is, because I think that's going to be a more worthwhile upgrade. Now, outside of that, for example, if you are on the 11 Pro or Pro Max, here is where I feel that this upgrade to the 13 is worth it. If you're already on the Pro editions of iPhones on the 13 and you completely skipped out on the 12 series, the 13 Pro upgrade is the most quote-unquote worthwhile upgrade from a technical perspective, because you're going to get that new 120 hertz display while getting the benefits of having an overall better camera system, way better lenses and sensors, better processing power, all of that stuff that you're typically going to get in an upgrade anyway, while getting the actual new tech that is that 120 hertz display. And it's a technology that I'd argue when people get it and actually experience it, it's something that's hard to go back to a 60 hertz display phone. You can argue that it's easy to scale down, go from a big phone to a small phone, or a small phone to a big phone. But the actual hertz and refresh rate, I think, is something that once you're used to 120 hertz, you're going to hate going back to something that's only 60 hertz. So if you're on the 11 or 11 Pro Max, I'd hard say upgrade to the 13 Pro if you're going to be upgrading anyway, and that's in the cards. Go ahead and do that. Everything else, everything below. So for example, there's probably people who might still be on the 11, and you're considering now that, the 13s are out, the 12s are going to be cheaper. I'd argue in this case, like for example, if you're looking at a 12 mini, which is now going to be about $600 versus a 13 mini, which is $700, that $100 price gap difference isn't worth enough you getting like the previous gen phone. Like if you're deciding between getting a 12 mini now that it's slightly cheaper versus a 13 mini, I'd argue save that $100 or spend that extra $100 and just get the 13 mini or 13 edition phone, whatever that is, because you're going to be more future proof. You're going to get the better features. This is for all those people who are coming off of something like older than an iPhone 11, right? And you're looking to upgrade anyway. That $100 price difference, give or take, even like, let's say like we look at the iPhone 12 base model, right? The iPhone 12 versus the iPhone 13. Again, it's like a $100 difference. So I think in that opinion, in that, viewpoint, it's just easier to save the $100 and get the most current gen model. Now, the different caveat here is for all of you who are out there who don't want to spend like $500 plus on an iPhone, and that's completely understandable. Again, it comes down to budget. So maybe you're on a way older iPhone. I think like the oldest iPhone you could effectively buy right now, at least through Apple's site, if I'm not mistaken, is the iPhone SE, or maybe even, the SE or the 11. So like if you're looking for a real budget phone, $400 is probably the cheapest you can go. I would argue you could still get the iPhone 11 at $500, which is still going to be a substantial upgrade for a lot of people who are coming from these really older phones. And at that point, again, the 11 is probably that sweet spot at $500, because even the 12 is going to be, $200 more at $700, and understandably so. Not everybody wants to spend $700 on a phone when it comes to like budget constraints and whatnot. So as always, your upgrade paths are going to vary a little bit. I'd say right now, hard set. You're on the 12 series, do not need to upgrade. If you're on 11 Pro, 11 Pro Max, and you want to upgrade, go to the 13 Pro or Pro Max. Don't just completely skip the 12 lineup. And then everything beyond that, older, it's always going to be super subjective around your budget and constraints and whatnot. So hopefully this helps some people out there and gives you some insight. Again, there's a lot of other varying factors out there. You may want to look outside the Apple ecosystem. Maybe you're coming from an Android device. I'm curious. Let me know in the comments down below. What phone are you currently on? Are you considering upgrading? Are you considering going a different route outside of Apple? Love to hear your thoughts and opinions. As always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing if you're not subscribed already, because we're going to be unboxing and taking a first look at the iPhone 13 Pro Max a week from now. So, as always, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one.